Honourable members, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, good morning and good evening. I would like to welcome you all to this virtual CPA webinar on quotas and other positive action measures to advance gender equality across the Commonwealth. My name is Benit Debuteza, Gender Lead here at the CPA Headquarters Secretariat, and I'll be facilitating this virtual session today. And it's a pleasure to have you all here. So without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce our chair, Ms. Catherine Fife. Just a brief bio before I hand over. So Honourable Catherine Fife is a member of the Ontario Legislative Assembly in Canada and has served as a representative for Waterloo since 2012. She's currently in her 5th term as a member of the Provincial Parliament. As a party science champion, she works to strengthen the connections between scientific and political communities. She's also serving as the official opposition Shadow Minister for Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade. She has held several leadership positions within Parliament, including chairing public accounts, caucus provincial and national organisations. She also chairs the Advisory Council on Tariff Response and Economic Security, which involves extensive stakeholder outreach and legislative research. She supported CWP Canada's work on She Should Run and election campaign support tools for young women across the country and was elected this year at our annual conference as the new CWP chairperson. So without any further delay, Ms. Fife, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Benit, and thanks to you and the entire team at CPA and CWP for ensuring that this launch can happen today. It's a pleasure to join all of you on this call. It is very early here in Canada, but we are meeting across the globe, and so I'm very impressed that strong women leaders have come together to launch this important report. Just to give you a quick overview of how this is going to run today, the part one of this presentation will be, of course, on the report by the lead researchers. This will take about 15 minutes. Then we're going to move to a really interesting panel discussion, and I'm very pleased to be joined by very strong leaders who have political expertise in this field as well. And then we're going to throw it over to you, the members from across the globe, who are going to join us for some questions and answers. And so look forward to that part of the session. Some of you may know some of the work that we're doing at CWP, but our work plan moving forward is looking to prioritize building capacity of women parliamentarians, increasing our knowledge around gender quotas to increase representation, and today marks the official launch of the positive action measures in Commonwealth Parliamentarians out of King's College. It is my pleasure to welcome the researchers who worked on this important report, and I'll just give you a very brief overview of their bios. But I do want to mention before we begin in earnest is that today's presentation really is going to be focusing on gender equality as a fundamental principle of human rights and a cornerstone of sustainable development. For parliaments to effectively function as representative institutions and safeguards of democracy, gender equality must be both advanced and prioritized. And I think that we all know that despite progress made in many areas, women's representation in parliaments remains inadequate. Data gathered by the CPA in September 2024 reveals that women parliamentarians represent a total average of 25.8% in parliaments across the Commonwealth. The figure is below the 30% target set by the Commonwealth heads of government and far from the goals set out at international forums as the Commission on the Status of Women that have called for 50-50 parity in political leadership. So to address this disparity, gender quotas and other adjustment mechanisms have emerged as promising strategies to create opportunities for women to enter politics and break the barriers that hinder their participation, meeting the CPA gender-sensitive parliament standard that parliamentary staff should, and I, in quotations, reflect the wider makeup of society in terms of other socioeconomic, cultural, or ethnic differences. And there are powerful tools that we can employ to shift the structures of our parliament. And this launch today of this important report sets a roadmap for us. So that's an opportunity for us to learn and grow together and move forward. So moving on to the presentation on the report, I do want to introduce the two researchers. Dr. Minna Cowper-Coles is a research fellow at King's College London. Minna has been based at the Policy Institute and the Global Institute for Women's Leadership at King's, where she works on their political leaders research stream, focusing on women, political representation globally, and the interactions between policymaking and gender equality. Minna gained her PhD at Birkbeck College, University of London. She's written a book on gender and political support, which was published in August 2022. And she's authored the report, Women Political Leaders, the Impact of Gender on Democracy for the Global Institute of Women's Leadership and the Westminster Foundation for Democracy, and was project lead for the report Bridging the Gap. We're also joined by Catherine Shuttleworth, who's a PhD politics student at the University of Manchester. Catherine is a PhD politics student and supervised by Professor Ford and Professor Hargrave. Her research explores strategies to improve the accuracy of vote intention polling, with a particular focus on how gendered survey response patterns may contribute to polling error. And previously, she actually worked as a research assistant on the Twice as Good project. And her work on gender quotas in the UK Labour Party has recently been published in the Journal of Elections, Public Opinion and Parties. And without further ado, I'd like to pass over the presentation to both Catherine and Minna. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. I've worked on this report with Catherine, and I just wanted to introduce it before I'll hand over to her for more of the details. We know that our democracies are stronger when they represent the full diversity of the people they serve. Yet across the Commonwealth today, only one woman sits in Parliament for every 3 men. In fact, women are less well represented in the Commonwealth than they are on average in the rest of the globe. Women face barriers such as party gatekeeping, patriarchal culture, financial costs, and violence and harassment. We hope that our report will be maybe one step towards improving this and ensuring that the voices of women within the Commonwealth are heard and the democracies are strengthened. Women's presence in politics isn't just about fairness, it's about better governance and better policy. Studies have shown that when there are more women in Parliament, issues like health, education, childcare, and domestic violence receive more attention and more resources. Diverse parliaments also make better decisions because they draw upon wider experiences, which is especially necessary as we face challenges like climate change and political instability. Diversity has also been shown to improve trust in government, which is particularly important at the moment, as we see that the faith in democracy seems to be ebbing globally. Women's visibility in leadership also has a role model effect. It shows that politics is not just a man's game, and it can inspire the next generation of girls to participate. So it's beyond fairness, and it's about changing policy and improving our futures. Our report, Positive Action Measures in Commonwealth Parliaments, reminds us that without deliberate action, women will continue to face these structural, financial, and cultural barriers that keep them out of decision-making spaces. And that's why we need these measures, not as special treatment, but as corrective mechanisms to make democracy genuinely representative. In this report, we look at 3 types of positive action measure: reserved seats, legislated candidate quotas, and voluntary party quotas. We give examples of where they have been adopted, the problems and the positives associated with each measure. We highlight the impact that they have had and how it was that they came to be adopted in the first place. We finish the report with some questions that should help guide any advocates interested in pushing for the adoption of positive action measures in their own country. We were lucky enough to speak to some very inspiring women, some of whom you'll hear from today, current and former members of Parliament, and hear their thoughts and experiences of quotas and other measures. We heard that, in fact, in the majority of cases, quotas and other measures had been very effective. And in others, they were seen to be perhaps not quite so effective, or perhaps not addressing the main issues. This range of views and experiences has been incredibly useful for adding the colour and nuance to our guidance. We're incredibly grateful to them for giving their time, and I'm so pleased that we'll be speaking to them, or you'll be hearing from them today. This report also brings together, thanks to Catherine's brilliant work, the vast academic literature about gender quotas and reserved seats to ensure that all the most recent scholarship has been included in this report, with some deep dives into a range of Commonwealth countries, to really give that the examples and bring those to life. And we brought it together with statistics and figures, which show how the hard numbers have changed as quotas and positive action measures have been introduced. So just as an introduction, I think I've said enough, and I'm going to hand over to Catherine, who'll give some more details on the actual findings and our recommendations. But I hope you find our report to be useful. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Minna, for a great introduction for the report. So as Minna has already highlighted, our report has sort of two key parts to it. The first examines the benefits as well as the drawbacks of positive action measures that have been used throughout the Commonwealth. And then the second part provides a series of recommendations for how to push for these measures to be adopted in the first place, as well as how to then ensure that they are effective once they've been implemented. So beginning with the findings from our country case studies, positive action measures have greatly advanced women's descriptive representation throughout the Commonwealth. So in Uganda, for example, prior to the implementation of their reserved seat policy, 12.2% of seats in the Parliament were held by women, but today this now stands at 34.1%. Similarly, in the Australian Labor Party, which uses a voluntary party quota system, women's representation has risen from 14.5% of parliamentary seats back in 1994 to 46% today. So a dramatic improvement. Positive action measures have also aided the advancement of women-friendly policy. Our interviews revealed that just having more women in the room can allow for women's perspectives to be considered during the policy-making process. And as such, many countries in our study have seen the adoption of pro-women legislation across a variety of areas, such as women's health, workplace rights, parental leave, and domestic violence. Specific examples of this would include the Sexual Offences Act in Guyana, as well as a specific policy to protect against workplace harassment in Pakistan. In some countries, the measures also coincided with broader cultural shifts that benefit women as well. So the increased numbers of women in positions of power has helped to change public perceptions of women in politics more broadly. This has allowed them to be seen as legitimate and capable leaders. And in Namibia, survey findings reveal that majority of citizens believe that the better gender representation in the National Assembly following their adoption of party quotas has actually made Parliament a more effective institution. Additionally, our report highlights some key evidence against one of the most common criticisms of quotas, which is that they lead to the election of unqualified and inferior politicians. So our report details academic literature to refute this claim. For example, in the case of the UK Labour Party, women elected through quotas actually performed as well as or better than their non-quota counterparts across a variety of measures of parliamentary activity. So as mentioned, the second part of our report offers a sort of toolkit for politicians in countries who are yet to adopt positive action measures or perhaps are looking to review their existing policies. So we detail how parliamentarians might go about pushing for these measures to be adopted, and specifically what they need to consider to ensure that they are implemented effectively rather than them merely being a symbolic measure. So we recommend the following strategies. Firstly, to utilise a women's wing within your own party to make sure you can put sufficient pressure on party leaders and elites. To establish and utilise a cross-party women's caucus to mobilise women on all sides of Parliament to support your cause, and also importantly to hold each other accountable to achieving your goal. And this goal, it should be common and clear among everyone. You must be united around a shared purpose, and this purpose should go beyond the confines of Parliament itself and should include aims of improving the lives of women and the fairness of society much more broadly. And these goals must be clearly established from the outset to make sure that a consistent message is being sent to those that are in positions to actually make the change. We also recommend that you draw on other countries that have already established these measures, because this will help legitimise what it is that you're asking for. And finally, we consider that you might suggest the implementation of a sunset clause within the policy, because this might help to appeal to those that perhaps have objections to the policy, because it can then make it seem like this action is a temporary solution rather than a permanent fixture of their politics. So beyond this, there are also other factors that you must keep in mind when designing the specifics of the policy itself. Positive action measures are by no means a one-size-fits-all solution. It is important to understand that different types of policy are better suited to different institutional contexts. So voluntary party quotas have typically been seen to be most viable and most commonly accepted in established democracies where electoral laws are already firmly entrenched, and so legislative policies are typically unfeasible. Whereas in younger democracies, there is often greater flexibility to introduce specific legislated measures. So systems like reserved seats and legislated candidate quotas are much easier to implement. So beyond that, in terms of specific recommendations, we highlight that policies need to be very carefully worded to avoid any potential misinterpretation or the accidental creation of loopholes that might be exploited by those who are opposed to the policy. You want to specifically ensure that the policy acts as a floor for women's representation, setting out the minimum number of women that should be in Parliament rather than inadvertently creating a ceiling that sort of caps the number of women that can be in Parliament. You want to make sure that this is a sort of a stepping stone to increasing the number of women in Parliament long term rather than accidentally sort of placing a limit on their presence. The measure also needs to be as transparent as possible to ensure that all women are aware of the policy and that they have equal access and ability to stand as a candidate. We want to ensure that the policy is not solely beneficial to a select few elite women who perhaps already have political connections, but rather all women to ensure diversity. Importantly, you must consider how the policy will be enforced. Without strong enforcement mechanisms, it will be easy for parties to ignore the policy or to implement it in a way which does little to actually benefit women. We recommend that policies are implemented alongside placement mandates, which refer to specific rules governing where parties appear on electoral lists or shortlists. Without them, women may simply be placed at the bottom of the party list or fielded solely in unwinnable constituencies. A common approach to placement mandates, which we recommend, is a zebra list system where women and men are placed in alternate positions on the list. It is also crucial to consider sanctions for non-compliance. Without them, positive action measures may act more like loose recommendations than they do binding party rules which must be adhered to. We argue that the most effective sanction is to give electoral authorities the power to reject lists which fail to meet these quota requirements. Finally, it is important to recognise that quotas cannot operate in isolation. They need to come alongside other policies and efforts to aid women. If there are still large barriers preventing women from wanting to actually stand as a candidate to begin with, then implementing a quota or another positive action measure will have very little effect on the actual number of women in Parliament. As such, the implementation of these measures should be done alongside an active effort to encourage women to enter Parliament to begin with. These might include policies to address gender-based violence against politicians, increase childcare facilities that are available on parliamentary sites, efforts to reduce or place limits on campaign costs, restrictions on media intrusiveness, and the introduction of mentoring or leadership schemes for young women. But overall, positive action measures, when they are actually implemented effectively, are very powerful tools for enabling the equal political participation of women. And our report highlights some clear examples of when and where this has been done throughout the Commonwealth. And we hope that these case studies, alongside our recommendations for their implementation, will be useful to you all. Thank you.
That's excellent. Thank you so much, Catherine and Minna. If you are just joining this webinar, I just wanted to give you a quick sense of where we are. We've just had a quick presentation on the report called Positive Action Measures in Commonwealth Parliaments, assessing the results of direct interventions for gender equality. This is key to the work of the CWP going forward. And in fact, the CWP membership has agreed that learning more about gender quotas as a mechanism to increase the representation of women in Parliament will be a key part of moving forward. And this event today, the hosting of this event today is an official launch of the report that will shed light on these key findings and recommendations. And we will also have a panel to further digest some of the findings and share experience, but also we will be looking towards our participants if you have specific questions on the application of this report. So once again, thank you so much for that overview. The staff at CPA have put the report into the chat for your reading pleasure. And I would also say there's an excellent executive summary as part of this report if you want to do a quick review of it. Now moving forward, we are going to move to the panel session. But before beginning this, I'd also like to ask Melanie, who is at CPA right now, to introduce the video contribution from the former Prime Minister Julia Gillard and chair of the Global Institute for Women in Leadership at King's College. And we're going to watch that video right now. I think it's about a 5-minute video. So please go ahead.
I'm delighted to have the opportunity to contribute to this important event on affirmative action across the Commonwealth. I know that you will be hearing from my Global Institute for Women's Leadership colleague, Dr. Minna Cowper-Coles, and I'm sure that you will find her contribution enlightening and the discussions across the day will be very rich ones. I've been asked to briefly outline the Australian experience with affirmative action. I'm proud to say that 30 years ago, the Australian Labor Party, the progressive party of government in my nation, adopted an affirmative action rule. I was part of the campaign leading to the making of that rule, and I can tell you it was hard fought for. It was definitely opposed. But apart from our vigorous campaigning, we had two great strengths in getting that rule adopted. Number one, the support of the then Australian Labor Prime Minister, Paul Keating, and number two, the fact the trade union movement, which is associated with the Labor Party, was also moving on affirmative action. So we were able to stare the doubters down and have the party adopt a rule which said by 2002, 35% of the people in the Australian Parliament, in the House of Representatives and the Senate representing the Australian Labor Party must be women. Now, this was a step change because when Australian women looked at their parliament before the affirmative action rule, what they saw was a parliament that was around 13 to 14% women. So the Labor Party making such a big, bold move really made a difference. And then over time, the quota increased from 35% to 40%. Today, actually, we don't need to clutch for our affirmative action rule because it's so routine for the Australian Labor Party to pre-select women and to have them run for Parliament, that the current Labor government, the Albanese government, is actually more than 50% women. I am completely persuaded that this has made us a stronger and better political party, and that the rule was key to change. Because if we look at the other side of politics, the Conservative side of politics, that also came off this low 13-14% base, we do not see anywhere near the degree of improvement that you see on the Labor side. Indeed, they are still struggling to reach a third women, whereas Labor is over half. So rules do matter, systems do matter, structures matter, and I know from my own experience, if you change the rules, if you bring more women into Parliament, then you change the culture of your political party, and that's what's happened in Australia. Good luck with the discussions today.
That's an excellent message and very, very timely for all of us here on the call. I would like to now move over to our panel. The two panelists that we do have, though, with us this morning, or tonight, wherever you are in the world, are very impressive women. I'm going to introduce the Honourable Dr. Katja Di Giovanni, who's an MP and member of the Parliament of Malta. The Honourable Di Giovanni is a chartered and registered psychologist, academic, and Maltese legislator whose career bridges higher education, workforce well-being, and public service. She is a fellow of the British Psychological Society and the Royal Society of Arts and a chartered scientist in the UK. She brings 2 decades of leadership across academia, government, and regulated sectors. Since October 2025, she serves as the Chief Operations Officer Academia at the Institute of Tourism Studies, following senior academic roles at the University of Malta. She was elected to Parliament in March 2022, and she contested the 4th electoral district for Paola, Foguara, Torxian, and Santa Lucia and Guggia, as well as the 10th electoral district. She also is an aviation psychologist with the European Association of Aviation Psychologists, and she consults on pilot selection and assessment. I found that particularly interesting. Her academic path includes a PhD, University of Nottingham, on career transitions and occupational psychology as well. She is married to Dr. Ing Kenneth Chirkop and is mother to Isaac Catania Di Giovanni, the youngest local councillor ever elected. So clearly she has inspired political action. Our second panelist is Senator Mari, and she's a member of the Senate of Pakistan. She is a politician and an active member of the Senate of Pakistan since 2018, representing the Pakistan People's Party parliamentarians. She was elected to the Senate of Pakistan on a reserved seat for women from representing the Sindh province, and she is from Sindh and has played a significant role in addressing important national issues during her tenure. Senator Mari has introduced and supported legislation focused on social welfare, such as mandatory daycare centers and institutions, the welfare of a paramedical staff in schools, and measures promoting parental leave. And additionally, she has advocated for establishing a minimum working age for children. So her current term in the Senate started in 2024, is set to conclude in 2030, and Senator Mari is recognized for her dedication to public welfare and progressive initiatives within Pakistan's legislative framework. So we have a couple of questions for our panelists, and I think I'm going to start with Honorable Katja Di Giovanni. I want to start here because Malta introduced its gender corrective mechanisms in 2021 and applied it for the first time in 2022. From your perspective, how has it worked in practice? Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Honourable Fife, and thank you so much for having me on this panel. It's indeed a great honour. I'm very happy to participate in any activity organised by the CPA. With regards to your question, yes, as you correctly said, it was legislated in 2021, and in 2022 we had the general election where the gender corrective mechanism started to actually take its effect. Before having this gender corrective mechanism, our parliament, with regards to women, we had about 15% of the MPs who were women, was quite low. Through the mechanism, we reached 22 women out of 79 members. Still not as high as we would wish it to be, but from 15%, we are now at 28%. This is the highest in our history. As a child, I remember that whenever I saw a woman in parliament, it was something really, really big for me to see. It was almost, as though, if I might say, it was as though they were aliens sort of in parliament. But now, through the mechanism, at least it's becoming more of a normality. However, we haven't reached the 40% yet. So it has worked for sure in numerical terms because it has corrected this chronic imbalance and brought in more women, including younger women and varied professional backgrounds. So we have educators, myself as a psychologist, some are still, yes, lawyers, but we have economists as well. We have a pharmacist. So it's quite diverse. But it has enriched debate, committee work, and the way we approach areas such as social policy and equality. At the same time, there is a lot which still needs to be done because I must say that the gender corrective mechanism wasn't a cure-all because it has not managed to remove certain barriers that we have. So like the cost of campaigning, the intensity of campaigning as well, the gatekeeping by the party, because then there still will be internal politics of the party, stereotypes as well. When I was campaigning and I was elected not by the mechanism, but by a by-election, because each member of parliament here can contest 2 districts. And there was a member who was elected on 2 districts. And so he gave one away and I was elected instead of him. So I did not make use of the mechanism. But by default, they tell me, you're one who has been elected through the mechanism. And I say, no, I have been elected through normal vote. So stereotyping is still there. And also the heavy burden of care responsibilities. So I'm the oldest female. I'm 50 years old. Most of my colleagues still have caretaking responsibilities. My son is now 17. So at least that burden has shifted just a little bit. So it was a necessary corrective tool, but it must be part of a wider reform package if we genuinely want a long-term sustainable parity.
Okay. That's very good. Thank you very much for that. Senator Mari, in your view, how effective have the reserve seats been in promoting women's substantive participation in politics and policymaking? Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Representative Fife. It's very nice to be a part of this panel. We have to understand that every country has its own dynamics. Pakistan is one of the most populated countries in the world. One electoral constituency in the province of Sindh has an average of 800,000 people. In Punjab, it's a lot more. It's around about 1,100,000. So our cities are bigger than a lot of countries. So while people might argue that, reserve seats are not a great way to ensure women's participation because you cannot ensure that actual political workers will be brought in, you can't deny that it is a step forward and a massive step. We have cultural issues. We still have so many constituencies where women don't go out to vote, because of which our Elections Act in 2017 had to put in a minimum 10% women voter turnout for an election to be valid. So when you talk about such constituencies, you have to understand that there are areas where women can't come out. Hence the requirement for reserved quotas for women. Yes, they're not as big as they should have been. In local government, while they are 33%, in provincial assemblies and in parliament, they are 17%. But again, women having a seat at the table is the first step. So I think reserve quotas 100% help. A personal example would be that of my sister. She was on a women reserve seat twice, and now she's been elected 3 times. So she's been a parliamentarian for 5 consecutive terms. That's like 25 years. But the first 2 were reserved, which allowed her to make a constituency, which allowed her to utilize, government resources or funds to help the people there, to make herself known and to get a foothold in the area.
Yeah.
After which she was able to contest elections. This was the 3rd time that she contested and won. So yes, 100%, they do help.
Yeah, very good. Thank you very much for that. Going back to the Honorable Di Giovanni, what can you give us some sense of what the political and public reaction to the new mechanism was when it was introduced? I mean, you mentioned some of the stereotypes, which we all sort of face. But what was the general feeling from the public, and how did that change the discourse around women politically participating in the system?
Thank you for that question. There was very strong support politically. We have a bipartisan system, so there is 2 major parties basically, and it was my party, Labour Party, who instituted this gender corrective mechanism, but it found support from the opposition, which is the Nationalist Party, and it needed the support because constitution can only be changed by 2/3 vote. So it needed to have this strong support overall. They passed with an overwhelming majority, in fact, because both sides realized that Malta was lacking behind, and that the wait and see sort of that it will autocorrect itself would not happen at all. Publicly, there were mixed feelings. There were mixed feelings, to be honest. And most of the women I meet in my constituency, they tell me, no, we don't like this gender corrective mechanism, because we feel that if women are valid, then they should be elected on their own steam. And in principle, I do support this notion, because I think it should be given a sunset clause, as it was being said, and given some time, as Senator Mari said, with regards to her sister. So, just putting a foothold in there. But then ultimately, once people culturally get used to having women in parliament, then they need to be given the space and freedom to be elected on their own steam. But I must put this but here. In Malta, we have an added complication. And this complication is that we only have 1 room for parliament. We don't have a bicameral. Yes. We only so whoever is elected can then be selected to be in cabinet, can have a ministerial role. And although we're at 28% when it comes to presence in parliament, when it comes to cabinet positions, we're only at 20%. So, and being in cabinet means that you have secretariat, means that you have, all the positions, means ironically that you have a driver to drive you around. I mean, all these perks which help you get a bit more foothold in your work as a politician. Now, most of us say, okay, it's been really good to have, all this corrective mechanism. But in reality, if you're not going to push women to have a leadership role when it comes to politics, then we are, at the starting point itself. So this is what is being discussed, and we've even had, after this experience, some members of parliament who have said, I will not be re-elected using the gender corrective mechanism, because this has not resulted in me given a fair chance when compared to most of our colleagues. We've also had 1 person who was promoted to cabinet through the gender corrective mechanism, but only 1 out of the 5 who are actually in cabinet positions. 2 are ministers and 3 are parliamentary secretaries. So it's not that if all the 5 were ministers, because it's not the case. And this makes a very big difference, because also due to media exposure as well. Because the more you are in cabinet, then you have a budget to carry out certain initiatives, and then we also get media coverage as well. So it's a complicated mix. Now we'll have to see how things develop later on. But so far, it is the Prime Minister who has the prerogative as to who to choose for cabinet. And so far, from 28%, we've fallen down to 20.
Okay, so you're sort of referring to a second glass ceiling once you enter into politics. Okay.
Yes.
We're going to circle back to the sunset clause in a second there, but first of all, I just wanted to give the Honourable Mari an opportunity to talk about how the gender quotas or other mechanisms and adjustments in your parliament have actually shifted power dynamics and decision making, and obviously that would impact legislation. Senator Mari, can you sort of explain how it looks like on the ground in Parliament for you?
Thank you. Okay, realistically speaking, there hasn't been a lot of change vis-a-vis decision making. Okay, and the one criticism, I'm going to go back to Representative Di Giovanni here for a minute and talk about how cabinet, selecting cabinet. The criticism that we get in that is that women should not be a part of cabinet just because they are women. And if there aren't women who fulfill a certain role, then they shouldn't be in cabinet just for that particular reason. And many times women are relegated to ministries like women empowerment or social welfare, things like that. Now, you're not going to see a woman defense minister anytime soon. But that being said, last year we have this an NGO called FAFN, Free and Fair Election Network, and they did this report on parliamentary agenda. And what they revealed in that report was that the women parliamentarians were responsible for more than half the parliamentary agenda. Now, this is, say, 22% women, maybe 18% reserve quota, and the rest elected on direct seats. Mm-hmm. They are responsible for over 50% of parliamentary agenda. This includes legislation, calling attention notices, points of public importance, resolutions, what have you, all our legislative tools. So obviously, they have a massive role to play in terms of bringing to the forefront the issues that they think are important. But for them to be able to get to that point, again, is at the behest of the parent party. And more likely, more often than not, they are not decision makers in that parent party.
Okay. But it's very impressive that women have been able to influence the legislative agenda and create laws that reflect, the lived experience of women. That's a pretty impressive benchmark moving forward. But it's good that we are having this sort of debate around how would you get to the next level based on merit, based on the gender quota mechanisms. So this is still an interesting, point of tension, I think, for women in politics. And for those of us who have the privilege of being inside this tent, we also have a responsibility to sort of uphold the highest standards. I think that's what you're both trying to get at. Honourable Di Giovanni, can you give us what were the key political or social factors that made it possible for Malta to adopt this mechanism? You did reference cross-party support, I believe, at one point, but what is different about Malta that you were able to move forward in this in really a positive and progressive manner?
I think small makes it easier as well, because we are a small country. Yeah. Although we're very population dense as well. But I think there was a lot of impetus also from abroad, in that in the EU, I think we are earmarked as being one of the most members with the least women in Parliament. And so exactly we're near the bottom of the EU rankings for women's representation. And I think that was one of the main stimuli to help us do this. And then the government appointed an expert committee to be able to do this. One of them is the chairperson was my colleague. She's now pro-rector at the university, Professor Carmen Sammout, to analyze options and to make recommendations. There was also Professor Frank Pezzina, now another pro-rector, and who worked out statistically how it could have been done, etc., etc. This gave the reform technical credibility and helped move it beyond party slogans because we needed an overall consensus. The status quo wasn't acceptable anymore, so this was something that we really had to work on, and this is why we managed to do it in such a short time. I think it really helped as well women to come along. I mean, I decided to contest because, to be honest, even though I didn't make use of the mechanism, I thought, yes, but I could still manage using these seats. So it has helped me move forward, and I do come from a family of politicians. So it's not only me influencing my son, but my father was mayor as well. And my first cousin, my late first cousin, was also a member of parliament. So there was quite a lot of influence, but I always held a little bit back because I was always under the impression that there was no space for women. And so we had, to do this so that all those women who would have been interested what otherwise would, find courage, pluck up courage to come forward and put their name on the ballot.
That's interesting. That's interesting. I mean, especially having a third party expert panel to sort of have that sort of independent authenticity to bring forward the recommendations. Senator Murray, I'm going to ask you the same question because Malta and India could not be more different in size and scope. What was there a turning point where you could move forward with these mechanisms? And was it driven by society or was it more of an internal process?
I wouldn't know about India.
Oh, sorry, Pakistan. Yeah, Pakistan. Sorry. Oh my goodness. Pakistan's very different than Malta though too. Yeah.
Yes, it is very different. And sorry, would you repeat your question to me? I got stuck in India for a second.
That's okay. I'm very sorry about that. What were the key political or social factors that made it possible for Pakistan to move forward in such a progressive manner? And was it driven by society or was it more of an internal process?
You see, Pakistan has been progressive since independence. We never had the suffragette movement. We never had a time when women couldn't vote. The founder of Pakistan, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, is said to have said, and I quote, that the most powerful weapon in the world is women, more powerful than the pen and the sword.
Yeah.
So we have always been progressive and also I think it comes from being a homeland that was envisioned for Muslims. Islam, in its true representation, gives a lot of rights to women, be it inheritance, be it political representation, be it leading armies even. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, with a lot of extremism, we tend to lose the actual spirit of the religion. But that's what the founders envisioned. So I believe, and I must say it happened before my time, so I cannot say for certain, but I believe that it was just a natural progression of things. When we saw that, when the people before me saw that women were not participating as much as they expected they would, because women were at the forefront in our independence movement. Uh-huh. They were all in all sorts of political arenas. We had a very robust women wing in the Pakistan Muslim League prior to partition. So I think that when that started to wane, the makers of the Constitution decided to incorporate this safeguard in order to ensure that it doesn't entirely disappear.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Both of you though have sort of referenced that, the sunset clause, like these mechanisms are not in perpetuity, so that they will not, I mean, there must be an end date for them. Is there a reason why that this is there? Perhaps you both don't agree, but is there a rationale for this, or is it something that you think culturally and society will expect from you? I'll go right to you, Honorable DJ Bani.
Yes, well, it is expected even by women that we're going to use this for only a time period because we are equally capable of getting elected on our own steam. But however, somehow we've had a situation where even when we have the door-to-door policy here in Malta, where you get votes by knocking on doors and meeting people up front. And people will tell you, but will you manage to take care of your family and do politics and do this and do that? Women still need to realize in our country that you can have a woman who is a leader and who is able, to carry out all the duties that are required of her, and that the care burden should be shared. And this is something which hopefully will take its course during the next 16 years until the gender corrective mechanism then will cease to operate, because we've given it 20 years.
Okay.
Another issue, however, which has worked against, was the fact that in going door to door and campaigning, male contestants on the ballot were telling constituents, you don't need to vote for Dr. ABC because she will be elected through the gender corrective mechanism anyway. And so that has also worked against against us in certain ways. So yes, I mean there are a lot of mixed feelings, and from time to time, even on the papers, they tend to interview us and ask us what we think and how we're doing and what needs to be done. I've also had to correct a newspaper because upfront they said, yes, she was elected to the gender corrective mechanism. She's new, so by default she was elected to the gender corrective mechanism. And I politely say, no, but I feel that there are colleagues who are very valid and who need to be in Parliament, even though they have utilized the mechanism. So yes, it's a mixed bag.
Okay, so that's interesting, the weaponization of the mechanism to
Yes.
be used against. Yeah, this is common, I think. Senator Murray, do you see the quota system as a permanent feature, or do you feel that there should also be a sunset clause, or at some point we move away from the making use of the mechanism and just fight for gender parity without it?
Since for the reserve seat for women and for religious minorities are a part of our constitution, I don't think we envision them as having a sunset clause. Okay. But that being said, it is my personal view that people elected on these reserved quotas should have a limit. Although that is not a practice, and there's a lot of internal party disagreements in this also. But I personally feel that there should be a term limit on people or women being elected on a reserve quota, for the simple purpose that that is the only way that younger women will get in.
Yes.
I mean, each term of parliament is 5 years. If someone is being elected on a quota for, say, 5 terms, they're in parliament for 25 years. So where do the young people go?
Yeah.
So for that basic reason, I would prefer there to be, while not a sunset clause to the quota system itself, but to the people utilizing those seats.
I see. I
And
see.
as far as the weaponization goes, I could not agree more. I remember my sister's first election because we're required to give our reserve seat lists before the elections. So, because the party wanted to make sure that she wasn't left out of parliament, they put her on priority also on the reserve seat in case she loses. And her opponent kept saying this to the people that, you know what, she'll still get in, even if you don't vote for her. She'll still get in, even if you don't vote for her. So, yes, 100% I agree with that. It brought back some memories.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. Let's talk just quickly before we move to the questions from our participants is who uses these mechanisms? Like who, I mean, for us in Canada, there's a strong mentorship sort of pathway into politics, but there's been some criticism of women who come from elite communities or more wealthy communities making use of, because they have the knowledge and the wherewithal to sort of move forward and apply these mechanisms. I'd like to give you both an opportunity just to address that and how we could make politics, the political arena, if you will, more inclusive of women across the spectrum. Since I have you right here, Senator Mar, do you want to go ahead with this one?
Personally, Madam Fife, I see nothing wrong with having women from, say, political families or elite families. I'm a fourth generation politician.
Sure.
That doesn't take away from the fact that I do wish to do public service and I do wish to make a difference and I do deserve a space in Parliament. I mean, across the world, there's some sort of taboo about dynastic politics. Whereas, I mean, if a doctor's child becomes a doctor, they're like, oh, great, taking after his father, walking in his father's footsteps. My father was a 5-time parliamentarian. My grandfather was a 4-time parliamentarian. That doesn't mean that I don't have the right to be in Parliament.
Of course.
So, I mean, it's not, the two are not mutually exclusive.
Okay.
That being said, at least in our party, we have very robust women wings.
Sure.
So there is a happy mix of women who do not come from political families but have been active on ground political workers.
Mm-hmm.
And elections in Pakistan, I don't know about other countries, but elections in Pakistan are expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are not cheap. So these are women who cannot afford elections in Pakistan and hence they deserve to be there on a quota. And the party obliges them. So there is a happy mix. I don't think one takes away from the other in any sort of way.
Yeah, I think the financial support piece is something that we should unpack at some point because those are barriers still do exist.
100%.
But also both of you have this experience with politics, so you've seen it up close and personal. So that exposure is also very important.
It is.
Honorable DG Vanley, please go ahead.
Yes, I must say that in 2017, the Labour Party had its own program of mentorship. It was called LEAD, and it was run by the Honourable Minister, this time for Energy. Her name is Dr. Miriam Dalli, who was also a member of the European Parliament. And she saw the difficulties that women have to enter politics. And so she instituted this program, and I had participated in this program as well. But then I left midway because I had some ill health at the time. So when I returned, unfortunately, there was no sort of membership to ease me back in. I had to find my own way as to what to do with my campaigning, how to do it, and how the structures are carried out. Basically, we have 3 ways of campaigning. It's the door-to-door, it's the telephone calls, and then you can also send mail shots and also being on television and radio programs most of the time. Mentorship in Parliament, that's another issue. I was lucky to be placed with another honourable member who had been in Parliament for about 25 years. So when it came to chairing a committee, I could follow his footsteps when it came to chair my own committee, for example. And that was very, very important. Luckily, I come from an educational background or a psychological background, and that helps me a lot in identifying who's best suited so that I can follow their example. So admittedly, I have a little bit of an advantage over there. With regards to affording and regards to equal access, on paper, access is equal to everyone. So if anyone comes to me and they tell me, listen, I would really enjoy, doing politics, but immediately I know that if that person is not going to invest in a solid campaign and is not going to have someone who financially invests in a solid campaign or, then they're going to really have problems. And it's going to be tough even to be elected in the manner that our gender corrective mechanism is instituted, because it is instituted in such a way as to rank order by first preference votes all the women who are not elected through the normal vote.
Yeah.
So when I was elected through the by-election, I already knew, even though my colleagues were elected normally through the election, I already knew that I was going to be elected through the gender corrective mechanism because I had got so many first count votes. I think that's basically it.
Okay, it's good. Thank you very much, both of you, for sharing, how politics is so personal for you as well, and that knowledge transfer that we also have a responsibility for to mentor future women going forward. I'm going to just go to a couple questions from the audience, the virtual audience, and one of these questions is for both of you. But how do you, and actually we could even extend it to Dr. Minna Cowper-Coles and to Catherine, if you'd like to weigh in, Catherine Shuttleworth. How do you engage men in conversations about advancing gender equality within Parliament? I mean, this came out of the research that it was cross-party support, but we can't do this work alone, obviously. So maybe I'll start with you, Senator Mari, and can you give us some sense as to how engaging your counterparts and then also, males in the political arena moving forward?
Thank you. This is such an important question. There is an inherent bias against women who are elected on reserve seats. The men do not view them as equal counterparts. There is, they are incredibly patronizing. While we don't experience that as much in Senate, because Senate is a much smaller house, and really it's the upper house. So most of us there are seasoned parliamentarians by the time we get there. But I know that in provincial assemblies, even in the lower house, in National Assembly, so there is a need to engage men. I don't know, honestly speaking, I don't know if this is possible at a later age when they come into Parliament. I really think that this stems from your basic schooling structure, and to explain to men or to explain to everyone how important women are. I think Parliament is just like, it's a reflection of the society, right? The kind of people you have in society are the kind of people you have in Parliament. So a man is going to understand the importance of a woman being part of the decision making only if he sees it in his own home, in his own school, if that's what he's seen from the get-go. I would go so far as to suggest curriculum changes, and I have been advocating for that. Not just, for politics, but to see women as equal partners. It's all about, we have this debate about equality versus equity, right? We've all been there. We've all discussed it ad nauseum. It is important for us to reinforce this at every step of the way and not wait until our colleagues are in Parliament and then say, hey, listen, women also need a seat at the table.
That's
right?
very good. Yeah. Curriculum and education is key for sure. Honorable Di Giovanni, please go ahead.
Yes, I agree with Senator Mari as to, that I think the educational system is the basis of everything. And I think we have made a very important move in that regard, because before in secondary schools, we used to have girls' schools and boys' schools, which were separate, and now we're into co-ed. And I think that has been an important step ahead, although research says that women tend to fall behind academically when that happens. Yeah, I think it was a necessary move. When we're speaking about the reform, it has to be based on clear data, on evidence. And I think that presenting evidence, whether it's a male, whether it's a female, we're trying to convince, I think it's very, very important. The question speaks about males, but males, to be honest, are almost a bit indifferent towards this mechanism, if I might add. It's more the women who are a bit resistant towards it, because they keep saying that we are, able to be elected on our own steam. But then they acknowledge as well the system, that the system is working against us. So it's very, very complex. What we can also do is to secure cross-party ownership, to keep working on cross-party ownership, and to identify key people and key change agents, even in the opposition, although they are conservatives, who can help you push such reforms time and time again. And it's not easy just adopting a gender corrective mechanism from another country. I think you have to see what the system is like, especially in the fact that, for example, in our parliament, unless you're in cabinet, you don't really get to pass any laws or to write any laws. You are just there to endorse laws as a backbencher, in my case. There has only been one parliamentary member who managed to pass a private member's bill. And yet again, she had to have the endorsement of a particular minister in order to do it. So it tends to be very, very complicated the way the system is. So designing a system which will, be in context with regards to the context of your own particular parliament is important. And quotas should never be seen as the end point. So they need to go hand in hand with the kind of candidates which are selected by the party when the party recruits. For example, one of the problems we have in our party is not the issue about women, it's the issue that we have, in my opinion, too many lawyers and too few technical people, like engineers, for example. So we need so many more engineers because we don't have them. Architects, again, a very rare breed in politics. So yes, that's another issue. So reforms in party recruitment, also on the way campaigns are financed. Parliamentary working hours, for example, because the working hours of parliament, since it isn't full-time, I mean, that's another issue that we have. And also more and more mentoring and training for aspiring women.
Okay, that's really good. I mean, I think you made a really important point. I mean, we want to be productive when we're there because it's a huge sacrifice, right? To move into this political arena space. Our researchers, would you like to weigh in on the intersection of, working cross-party with male counterparts? Catherine, we want to go.
Yeah, sure. I completely agree with what everyone has already said on this question, but I think one thing that perhaps hasn't been mentioned is sort of the benefits electorally of having more women. There's considerable research that shows that having more women in Parliament can make women in general more engaged in politics. So I think one angle would be to speak to men in positions of power and engage them in the policy by convincing them that having more women through this mechanism can help bring their own support at election time, basically.
Yeah, that's good. Dr. Minna Copper-Coles?
Yeah, so to endorse what everyone else has said, first of all, and I completely agree that presenting evidence is normally a way to get change. And if you're trying to implement a mechanism or introduce a mechanism, I just to draw upon what the Honourable Member Dr. Giovanni was saying, often an embarrassing statistic can help get things moving. If the country or your region or whatever is kind of showing up as an anomaly or really lagging behind, that can introduce action. And looking at where we've seen quotas being implemented, quite often they're either copying neighbouring countries or it's come to time of other kinds of democratic change or post-war or struggle or As you're saying, as the Honourable Member, Senator Murray was saying, the reserve seats were put into the Constitution at the beginning of, so when there's a fresh start or a new government being made, that's often when that's the time to strike, basically, and try and get something built in. And often that might come because there's pressure from external sources or whoever's kind of supervising that transition. So the international community might be saying, well, it might be a good point to put in some kind of quota or mechanism to ensure that this new democratic system is going to be very representative. The other thing I think is worth sort of saying is looking at what the outcomes and the it's not just about fairness. If you're talking to men, obviously that's a major issue, but also, like Catherine was saying, there's the economic advantage there's the electoral advantage, but also once you have women engaged in policy making and engaged more, you're going to have a more stable and trusted government. The evidence shows that. So when people see themselves in the Parliament, there's going to be much more engagement from the community, we hope. And I also think that if you have women, the whole of the community and the diversity of people making policies, you're going to potentially down the line, but you're going to start seeing a greater economic engagement and greater economic output. We know that a lot of women, because they're kind of sidelined and excluded from government and therefore policy and therefore the economy, et cetera, that they aren't living up to their full potential and contributing as much as they can. So there are lots of different things going on there, but those are just a few things that popped into my head.
That's really good. I mean, the political engagement piece is really key. And this is a good argument to have people be paying more close attention to governments, especially when we're seeing the polarization of politics right now. Dr. Giovanni, you have your hand up. Do you want to go ahead?
Yes, please, because I forgot to mention 2 points, and I think it has been key to have more women, because there were some. Okay, they were men who instituted these laws, but they were brought up by women in Parliament, and one of them was about miscarriage leave. So we have more leave for people who unfortunately miscarry a child, and there was also another measure where if you had a miscarriage, you would have had to stay in hospital with women who are still expecting. And now they have been separated because psychologically. So I was really happy to speak about that first, and something was done about it at least. And then there was a colleague of mine who spoke about having leave for those women who had a child which ended up in the ITU for babies, basically. And so that was instituted as well. And another thing which will be instituted is funding for companies to be able to have mental health first aid at their place of work. So that is something else which contributed which was done by women essentially. At least we proposed it, but then it had to be led the ministerial arm, the executive arm, which actually takes it to Parliament. Thank you. I wanted to say that.
That's good. That's good feedback. Thank you very much. This next question from the audience actually ties into both attracting women into the political arena and then making sure that they actually feel productive and supported in politics. And it reads as follows: what changes to parliamentary culture, procedures, or working conditions have been necessary to make gender equality measures effective and sustainable? Because I know from my own experience, I mean, I've mentored and courted women into this space, and then once they got here, they were completely turned off by the nature of the work, by the lack of being able to be productive and putting forward ideas, and really seeing that the sacrifice that they're making in their own personal lives to work all the time was paying off. Senator Murray, do you want to start? Do you want to weigh in on this? The conditions to actually make, Parliament more, I guess, gender friendly and effective and sustainable.
Sure. Thank you. First and foremost, of course, you have the very basic changes to the structure itself. I mean, like the infrastructure. You have spaces for women in parliament, you have their resting rooms, you have separate washrooms and all of that. But that is, I think, the first step. But the one thing, unlike my colleague from Malta, we don't have any issues with our legislation, thankfully. So women are able to feel productive. That frustration is not there. I mean, I personally, in my first term, was able to get all three of my mandatory daycares act, mandatory paramedics in schools, and the maternal and paternal leave. All of these are now acts of parliament, and they were private member bills. So we at least have that satisfaction of being productive, like I shared the Fafan report for you earlier. But one thing that we in Pakistan have a lot of is targeting of women in public spaces. And with the increase of social media, this was becoming especially brutal. I mean, and there's no stop from there. I mean, sexual harassment to, physical threats, death threats, you name it, and they're there. And now, thanks to the anonymity of social media, it is also not easy to find out who. So I know that a recently passed Electronic Crimes Act is also going a long way in making women feel more secure, about reporting such cyber crimes. And even the media itself, the traditional media, our defamation laws, which were not very strong, are becoming stronger. So generally, women, in Pakistan would leave politics not because they feel unproductive, but because they feel unsafe. So it is important, and it was necessary to ensure their safety, the safety of their reputations, of their family life, and of their mental health, frankly. I mean, who wants to be harassed midnight, all day, 24/7? So these measures, these strong legislative measures with implementation of said legislation, I think is a very important change.
Yeah, very good. Honorable Di Giovanni, do you want to weigh in on this, please?
Yes, there's a marked difference because in Malta, yes, some women have been harassed online, so we are looking into that. We are still trying very hard to get a childcare center, which most of my colleagues can use. Unfortunately, some of us do bring our children into Parliament. So there was a time when my son was younger and I used to bring him in with me, but he couldn't go into the plenary. So he was asked to leave. I don't see why that should be a problem, because we need to give access even to children. I mean, depends what facilities you have, it's true, but there's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. The fact that we are part-time, you need to have still your full-time job in the morning, and then you need to attend Parliament in the evening. And that, to me, should be the game changer there, that we should have a full-time Parliament. But so far, no one has ever instituted that. In fact, we only get an honoraria. We don't get a particular pay, which is, part and parcel of our duties. So it's not even called a salary, it's called an honorarium. And therefore, this is a whole mentality which needs to change, that unless parliamentarians are all males and females are properly paid, and unless it has a career structure to it, rather than being something aside, then things will not move forward.
Very good, very good. So even if we have these quotas and these mechanisms to really open the door for women parliamentarians, there needs to be some structural supports in those parliaments to ensure that women want to be there, they want to stay there, and they can feel productive. Did either of our researchers want to weigh in on these conditions, or Catherine?
Yeah, I can. I think ensuring that mentoring schemes don't just stop at getting someone elected is a key thing. For example, showing politicians how to actually run a parliamentary office and how to behave in the chamber and like the rules of the game, basically. I feel like if if the mentoring schemes are just targeting on how to run your campaign, they're going to enter Parliament and not feel very productive because they're not going to know the rules of the game that they're in. And secondly, sort of building off earlier points about safety measures, I think it's important from the outset for there to be clear ways of reporting sort of online harassment that's built into the Parliament itself, rather than sort of having to guess how to report it, and then that might make people not want to report it. There should be sort of clear rules and regulations for how to go about reporting online harassment. And then also sort of childcare support's been touched on before, but making sure that facilities are specifically in the building so you can bring your children in and you don't feel like you have to miss out on parliamentary time or potentially leave Parliament entirely because of childcare responsibilities.
Okay, thanks. Dr. Minna Kepper-Coles, you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you so much. There's some, and I'm sure the CPA have lots of advice on gender sensitive parliaments. There's some brilliant work there, and I think you've touched upon a lot of the stuff, the harassment reporting mechanisms, childcare. And one of the things I found very frustrating with the UK Parliament was when COVID came along, all these changes in a very, very, very slow moving institution were brought in at once. And then at the end of that, no one did a review to see whether any of these changes had helped actual members of Parliament with balance, with the juggle of life. And I believe that some of the kind of remote access, lots of women had said it was brilliant because, you know, if you're representing someone which is very far from London, they were suddenly able to attend certain meetings online, which meant they could visit their constituency offices, you know, and it really, some of these remote and hybrid access, I think, could be implemented to help with a lot of those challenges, such as childcare and getting the balance right. That's just my personal gripe from the UK Parliament. There are some really interesting laws being introduced in other countries, I think in Latin America, around harassment and abuse of women in politics in particular, where it's becoming not just a crime or not just a sort of low level matter of harassment, but it's been seen as an electoral crime to abuse. And I'm proposing a bit of work, hopefully to review how that's been carried out and whether that's effective, which I think would be really interesting, because this matter of safety online and offline is a really serious issue, I think, for women. And just to reflect a bit more on what the Honourable Member De Giovanni was saying, I think some of those issues she was highlighting are very true of local politics in the UK, where it's very poorly paid, but no salary, and it's seen as a part-time, almost like a hobby, something you do as a kind of community service, which means where I live, which is outside of London, it's all retired men who are sort of like, yes, I'll do a bit of politics, and all the people who have childcare or responsibilities aren't able to participate because they're not getting a full-time salary. And so it means that it skews the demographics a lot to a very particular type of person who's able to fit in a non-salaried. So I think having that, so the financial, like obviously a salary is incredibly important for people who are giving up their time to represent people. So yeah, so there's a few different things there, sorry.
Oh, no, those are very good recommendations. As someone who has a restraining order on a number of people, and I was at the police station last week, I think that, this is a broader conversation that women are facing, and I would be really interested in learning about more of what's happening in Latin America. I do want to say I'm very conscious of time, and I will say to our panelists that as the conversation evolved, a number of questions sort of came in as often happens with these things, and we're gonna send a few of those your way so that we can capture some of your thoughts and share with our fellow parliamentarians. I just want to say, today's discussion has really been very powerful, and this report and the research contained within it is not only key to our work as the Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians, but really will inform a roadmap going forward so that we can actually reduce some of those barriers, inspire more women to come into the political arena, and then hopefully, hold them here so that, they can build on that experience. And I think that both of our panelists have really highlighted the importance of that knowledge transfer going forward. As mentioned, I think that we all now have a better understanding that these mechanisms and measures need to be very intentional. They don't just happen off the side of your desk, and that they must be based with integrity, not just symbolic measures. And we do need to go beyond representation in a very meaningful way, and not just those targets. We want to make sure that the experience translates into strengthening our legislation and policy options. And I think both panelists really drove that home. When you do read the report, the theme around just being in the room matters. And it made me think of a quote from another parliamentarian that says, "You can't entirely be ignored if you're sitting at the table." And I got that sense from both of the leaders on this panel. Finally, I just want to say, we are privileged to have this platform as parliamentarians, and I do think that it is a heavy responsibility and that we can't waste this opportunity. And as mentioned, this report does provide a very strong roadmap. I do want to thank the Honourable Amari and Honourable Di Giovanni for sharing your experience and your journey into politics and what keeps you here. You've been very inspirational. I also want to thank Catherine and Dr. Cowper-Coles for your contribution. This is really a building block for us going forward, and it's anchored our work as Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians. With that, I'm going to wish you all a good day or a good night, depending on where you are. The sun came up behind me during this session, and I think that that's a good metaphor for the day going forward. So thank you very much. And once again, thanks to the CPA staff as well for facilitating this workshop. Have a great day, everybody.